My name is Mary Jane Grant. People call me MJ for the most part.
I have deaf parents. My father is no longer with us. But currently I'm caring for our deaf mother who's living with dementia.
There's something that can be a little bit isolating about caring for parents or being a carer in general. And there's something really beautiful about it at the same time. Back in 2009, my mother started showing signs of dementia while she was caring for her own mother, who had dementia. We knew things were becoming increasingly worse for my mother when one freezing cold winter night, my grandmother got out of the house and my mother, just by virtue of natural instinct, woke up and looked out the front door and saw her there. She had fallen on the ice and she was lying in the driveway, couldn't get up. She couldn't walk. And my mother managed to drag her in the house as best as she could and got her to the living room and sat up with her all night. And when morning came, she finally thought to call her sister to let her know my grandmother had fallen. She could have called 911 through the video phone, and she didn't. She could have called my aunt, and she didn't. At that point, we knew her problem-solving skills were really starting to diminish, and she was in no position to care for her mother. So my sister and I decided to have my mother tested, and when I called the neurologist to make an appointment, I told him she's deaf, she needs a sign language interpreter, and they refused to hire one. It had taken so long to try to get her an appointment because of this issue. I didn't want it to drag on any further, and I didn't have any energy left to fight that battle. So we went forth with the appointment, and I went with her. She had an MRI, and she had some cognitive testing done. And what they found was she had several lesions on her brain due to several strokes over the years, mini strokes, and that eventually led to vascular dementia. So we were given the diagnosis and then sent on our way. Without any resource information, without any sort of roadmap as to what the next steps would be. And my sister and I were basically left to navigate this on our own. My mother lived on her own for several years after the diagnosis, and during those years, it became increasingly frustrating for us because we were trying to gauge the status of how she was doing, and we were also trying to figure out what she needed and then how to access the services that she needed. So over time, it just got to be too much, and we had to move her back. Okay. So when we first moved her back here, initially it felt manageable. And it really was. It actually was quite manageable. But it wasn't long before she started to decline. And her needs for care became what I felt to be overwhelming.
Wow, some rocks.
A couple of times we actually found her down the road. She had wandered off and we'd find her lost and confused. But she was happy. So as time went on, we had to make the decision to move her into a memory care home. We found this beautiful place, brand new facility nearby.
Hello.
It actually seemed like the perfect place for her. Staff really made a point of making sure that she felt included in everything. So it was a good thing. Things were going well and she seemed happy. But the problem was nobody signed. So when I posted that initial video and conversation about my mother experiencing isolation, the turnout from the deaf community was really great. My mother had visitors. People would sit with her. When I would go visit her, staff would tell me that she had a visitor today and they sat with her for 2 or 3 hours and she was so happy. So she started having visitors from the deaf community and she was happier. And so that seemed to be a nice solution for the isolation that she was experiencing. Then, over time, assisted living homes are expensive, and we started running out of money quick. She was there for about 1.5 years, and we thought at that point, when we ran out of money, she would qualify for state aid, and she didn't qualify. All of her retirement savings that she had intended to use for travel and enjoying her retirement was spent on her care. And then we had nothing. It feels a little unfair to me that people work their entire life and they arrive to a point of retirement and then have to spend all their retirement down on memory care. If you're well off, you can afford good care. If you're not well off, you can qualify for state insurance, and that might cover mediocre care depending on the facility. So if I could go back, you don't know what you don't know, and I don't think that I could have really done anything different besides encourage my parents to get long-term care insurance, because in order to create better services, you really do have to have a needs assessment in the state, and that does require some work with the legislature and to see where the gaps are so that hopefully services can be put in place to make sure deaf seniors have what they need in their later years. It's one thing to have my mom in an environment or in services where she's accessing a program maybe through a sign language interpreter. It's another thing when she could be part of a program where she had access to direct communication and full involvement, full participation. Sometimes people assume that providing an interpreter or putting closed captioning on a video is full access when it isn't necessarily. I think it's the minimum. You really need programming that has individuals who use sign language to communicate, who are staff. And that's why I really like the idea of having a tiered program maybe set up at a deaf school. A lot of the residential deaf schools have room or additional facilities could be built to accommodate senior housing and tiered care. So you have individuals who may need the minimum medical care all the way up to people who have dementia or Alzheimer's. I think a program like that would allow for students to get involved on the job training, and also would allow for opportunities for youth to gain experience being around deaf seniors. Deaf seniors would benefit from the gift of having deaf students, deaf youth around. I think that community service opportunities would be there as well. And I think that would be a really inviting space for the deaf community. It's a way of preserving language and culture, which is so incredibly important and valued in the community. I think there are some ideas that perhaps could come to fruition someday and actually be a really wonderful thing for people like my mom. It's so interesting to me when I think about how my life has come full circle. Because when I was young, I was so curious about people who were aging. As soon as I was at the age I could volunteer in nursing homes, I went and signed up at a couple of local nursing homes and would go in and read to some of the residents, would visit with residents. I would do some activities, arts and crafts. And there was a deaf resident who was living in one of the homes, and they introduced me to her. They brought me to her, and I remember her as clear as day. Her name was Alice. Culturally deaf woman, used sign language to communicate, grew up at a deaf school, had arthritis, and loved basketball, and was really isolated. And I would go visit with her, and I introduced her to my mom. I brought my mom in to meet her, and my mother would sit with her, and they became really good friends. And I feel so grateful that my mom and I could be with her and maybe give her some sense of comfort and feeling of belonging. Towards the end of her life. The seeds of hope were planted at that point in my life to make sure nobody, no human experiences that kind of isolation. Where they're in a place where they don't have visitors, or people who can really communicate with them. And hopefully someday, before my mom is gone, there will be a better answer. It's very different now having her here than it was when we initially moved her here years ago. The relationships that she's developed with me and my kids and my husband, it's virtually the new relationship. And what we experience is moments of joy, moments of frustration because life is busy and our plates are quite full. And it can be really difficult on my daughter, who's 6 years old, and she knows no different than having a grandmother who has dementia. But she manages to have fun with it. I think it's brought my husband and I a lot closer because we are in this together. We're supporting each other through this journey. And with the good, the bad, the ugly, that comes along with caring for someone who is living with dementia. She has such a big heart. And she's fun. She's so much fun. And it's funny because I discovered roller skating at the beginning of this pandemic because I had to get out. And as soon as I put them on, I felt like I was flying. I felt so free, and it was just, it was exhilarating at the risk of sounding dramatic. And I would just roller skate in the house, down the hall, when it would get dark out. And my mother would smile and tell me that she used to roller skate at the rink when she was younger. And when I look back on those pictures of her roller skating or with her friends at the rink, you know, you can just see she's joyful. And, you know, I don't know enough about dementia to know, you know, how it works in the brain. But what I know is that it has removed the veils, and I feel like her essence has just come out. I mean, just now. I went outside and sat on the deck with her for a little bit, and she looked at my daughter and asked who she was, and I said, "That's my daughter." And she was like, "I've never met her before." I've never seen somebody so happy to meet people over and over again. To have the opportunity to spend time with somebody who's so incredibly joyful and so incredibly grateful to meet people, it's a gift. The beginning of this pandemic, it was really, really hard because my time, was either early in the morning when I would get up and go to the gym.
Thank goodness she's sweet.
Or in my car in between interpreting assignments. And that got taken away in an instant. And I was left to sit with myself without an escape. Trying to work from home and manage all of that while my mother was increasingly becoming confused was extremely frustrating. And I felt bad. So we would take breaks and we would get out and we would go for a walk. And when we did, she notices every tiny little thing, beautiful like shiny pebbles or something that looks like a heart or a bird or a leaf. Look at that leaf and the acorn. She wants all of it. She just wants to soak in every bit of it. And while I'm like, all right, let's walk, it forces me to pause and look at these beautiful parts of nature with her. So there's a lot of beauty in this. Hence, dementia can be beautiful. In the viral video, you can see the beauty that she emits. I will not look back with regret. Because I have put my heart and soul into this journey. I didn't lose myself. I found myself. And I found my mom.